All right, everyone. So today I wanted to dedicate a video talking about the biggest mistake that I've made in Raid Shadow Legends. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this now is because this is actually a recent mistake that I ended up making. It just happened a few days ago, and I really felt like it was worth talking about for a few different reasons. One of them, though, is when I first made this YouTube channel, when I first started making videos, which weren't even for Raid Shadow Legends, one of my biggest goals with YouTube was to put videos out there about mistakes. And the reason is because I wanted to share the mistakes that I made throughout whatever games I were playing in order to make sure that the people who watch the videos would not make the same mistakes that I did. So educational purposes and things like that have always been one of my top priorities when it comes to videos. And now that I've made another really big mistake in Raid Shadow Legends, I wanted to talk about it, so hopefully you guys can have the information so that you guys don't go through the same insanity that I had to go through over the last few days. And what mistake I'm talking about is, it has to do with one of the recent events that we had. More specifically, it actually has to do with one of the recent tournaments that we had, and it is this champion training tournament that ended a couple of days ago. Now, I ended up posting a image on my community tab for my channel saying that I wasn't going to make it, and it turns out that I was right. I did not end up making it. It was actually even worse than I expected. I did not end up in second place. I actually ended up getting third place. But an important thing to note is the time that I ended up making that community post was actually pretty important, because right around the time that I ended up making that post, which had this image right here with the current leaderboards, about 8 hours or so before the event actually ended, this was the moment that I had accepted after a full week's worth, actually closer to a full 10 days worth of almost nonstop grinding. That was the point. It wasn't until about half a day before the event ended where I finally accepted that I'm just not going to make it. That means that I went through 9.5 days of pretty much nonstop grinds, leveling up food champions and getting points for this tournament, thinking that I was going to find a way to be able to get first place, and not realizing it until the very final stretches of the events. Now, like I said, it actually turned out to be worse, because the person in third place was the example of what I wanted to achieve from this event. They were extremely prepared, and they actually were able to even jump ahead of me and manage to finish off in first place. Now, there are a lot of mistakes that I ended up making throughout this event, and it's these multiple smaller mistakes that really ended up in the accumulation of one really big giant mistake. So as you guys can see in the final leaderboard here, I actually ended up in third place. So my reward was 4 6-star pieces of Relentless gear, and that person who was in third place actually managed to even jump ahead and get first. So they got a lot of points just in the last few hours of the event. Now, like I said, this wasn't just one mistake. It was one really big mistake, but it came from a bunch of very small mistakes. And I wanted to talk about those in some detail. So first of all, let's go through the mistake of resources. How many resources did it take in order to end up getting the approximately 43,000 points that I got in this event? And the answer is, it took quite a bit of resources. This was definitely not a free-to-play friendly event. I think it's pretty safe to say that, but let's break it down. So this is just going to be an approximation. I know something that people are probably going to wonder right off the bat is, yes, there are going to be more efficient ways to get points, but a lot of those more efficient ways to get points are not really sustainable for an extremely long period of time. Like, you could end up leveling up 4 and 5-star champions, but you're probably not going to have enough 4 and 5-star champions to get 40 to 50,000 points. So you're still going to spend a lot of your time leveling up 2 and 3-star champions, because you need more of the lower star level foods in order to get the higher star level foods. So you spend a lot of time working on 2 stars and 3 stars in order to be able to make your 4 stars, which you spend less time on. So even though this isn't going to be the exactly most efficient amount of points per energy, it's going to give you a rough idea, as well as the understanding that the more efficient methods are not going to be sustainable throughout the entire event. So most of the time I spent leveling up 2 and 3-star food, and they're both relatively similar in the amount of points and points per energy that you get. So just as an example, 3-star food, which by the way, I still have a ton of leftovers, and I say leftovers as a pun because that's really what this is. These are not even the full results of everything that I got throughout this event. This is just the stuff that I had at the very end that I wasn't really able to find a direct use for because I was just leveling up so much stuff that I had so much extra. I leveled up a whole bunch of champions. As you guys can see, pretty much all my rares are 4 stars. All my epics now are at 5 stars and leveled up. And I even have a bunch of 6 stars that are at level 60 as well. So this was a lot of grinding and a lot of champions were made in order to work on this event right here. But getting back to this page right here, so most of the time was spent leveling 2 and 3 star food. Now, 3 star food is a good example because that's the first point where you start getting 2 points per level instead of 1 point per level. So a 3 star champion has a total level cap of 30, of course, which means you can end up getting 30 levels, technically 29, but we'll just use 30 to make it a little bit more simple to understand. So 30 levels, 2 points per level, that's going to end up being 60 points per champion. But when you level up champions, remember that you level up 3 at a time. You have your main campaign farmer, whoever it might be, and then you have your 3 slots for your food champions. So that's going to be a total of 180 points by leveling up a full set of 3 star champions all the way up to the max level of 30. Now this takes approximately 20 runs of 12-3 on Brutal, which is 160 energy, which is going to give you approximately 180 points in the tourney. Now you do also end up getting points for ranking up champions, so you don't have to forget that. That's another a decent chunk of points. But just for simplicity's sake, we'll say approximately 1 energy per point for now. Now, something else, when you do factor in the points that you get from ranking up your champions, as well as the fact that I used a ton of brews. I had so many more brews before this event. I know almost 200 seems like a lot, but I had way more before this event started, so I used a bunch of those as well. You know, instead of going with 1 point per energy, which would be something like 43,000 energy, when you factor in the brews and the rank ups, it's about 25 to 30 or so thousand energy that I ended up spending on this event. Now again, it could be a few thousand more, it could be a few thousand less. The important thing is you just have a rough idea of about what it took in order to get 43,000 points for this tournament. So 43,000 points, we're still looking at 25 to 30 or so thousand energy, and that is a lot of resources. If you do decide to purchase energy with gems, you're going to get a full refill, of course, which is 130 energy at level 60 for 40 gems, which means that 25 or so thousand energy is going to be approximately 7,700 or so gems. So that's a pretty decent amount of resources, but it's not anything completely insane in comparison to the amount of gems I have. Of course, I know this is always a comment that a lot of people ask. If you guys are wondering, I have a video from a while ago now, a couple of months ago at least, talking about all these gems. No, I'm not sponsored by Plarium or anything too crazy like that. It's not any kind of insane answer, but it's still a lot of resources to get a very underwhelming reward. It's essentially like the same response as doing about 7,700 ancient shards worth of summons, which you can end up buying big shard packs for 900 gems each. So if you were to buy something like, 8 of these, 8 to 9 of them, which is like 90 or so ancient shards, and then end up getting nothing rewarding at all, no legendary, no good epics, it's about the same amount of resources, right? But that happens a lot. I've definitely gone through hundreds of ancient shards before. I even have a giant summoning session on the channel where I do 200 ancient shards, and I won't get too far into spoilers, but I don't really get anything too amazing for 200 ancient shards. I get some decent epics, but overall, it was relatively underwhelming, and I don't consider that to be the biggest mistake that I ended up making. So if it's the same amount of resources, how come this was a much bigger mistake? And one of the really, really big contributing factors was also not just the amount of resources that this event took, but it was the time investment as well. Shards, you can end up summoning 100, 200 ancient shards in 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes or so. I could fit it in a single video and be done with it. And I hate to say it, but you could end up being disappointed in just 15 minutes playing Raid Shadow Legends if that's what you want to do and summon a bunch of shards. But the problem with this event was not only did it take almost 8,000 gems worth of resources, but it also took me almost 10 full days of grinding pretty much every single day, non-stop, leveling up champions, repeating Brutal Stage 12-3 over and over and over, just to realize that 8 hours before the event was going to end that I probably was not going to end up making it. That's another thing as well, is that when it comes to these tournaments, I didn't realize this until the very last day, that I probably was not prepared enough. I probably didn't think it through enough, and I had to throw in the towel. And it turns out that not only I was right, I was extremely, extremely right, because I ended up not only getting second place, I ended up getting third place. So why did that happen? Because that was a little bit unexpected, but not really. If you take a look again, the screenshot that I posted, I was in second, but I actually finished off in third. And something else, another mistake that I made when it came to this event was extreme lack of preparation. I just went into this event saying, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, and whatever happens, happens. And that is a really big mistake. And now that we've had one of these events happen, I could safely say that if they do happen again in the future, that's not really the mindset that you can go into. You really need to be prepared. You really need to know exactly what it's going to take in order to win one of these events, because getting anything but first place is very, very disappointing. And that's another thing too, is the way that the rewards were for this event. It really is just a kick to the teeth to not get first place. Sure, Relentless gear is always great, but spending almost 8,000 gems worth of energy for 4 pieces of Relentless gear, really just, it's a really bad feeling. And that's another thing that made this such a big mistake, is that feeling in the last day of knowing I wasn't going to be able to make it, that I just spent a full week plus worth grinding, a bunch of resources, time, and that I was not going to end up making it, was just, it was a really, really unfortunate feeling. And probably, despite the fact that I've done a bunch of summons and been very disappointed with my summoning videos, I think this one was probably the one that ended up making me feel the worst. So I know that a lot of these things might not relate to you as much if you are free to play or you don't have a lot of resources, but I have a feeling that Plarium is going to somehow find a way to make these events a bit more relatable to people who are not as big spenders. This was really a whale event, and I will safely admit it, but I think in the future they're going to tune them down to where maybe instead of having 250 people in the bracket, they're going to make it, go back down to 50 or even 25 or something like that, and it's going to be more reasonable for those of you guys who maybe don't have as many resources as me to try to go for it. And I would say that as Plarium fine-tunes these events and releases more of them in the future, even if they do become more appealing, and that's a big theme that Plarium has, is they always start off releasing stuff for the whales, and then as time goes on, they'll release the same stuff but make it more and more accessible for non-whale players. Be careful, guys. Think it through and really understand exactly what it's going to take in order to get the result that you are looking for, because I made that mistake. It really sucks. I'm still not quite over it, even though it's been a full day since the event ended, and I wanted to talk about this and share the information with you guys so that you don't make the same mistake that I do. So, like I said, that's always been one of my main goals with the YouTube channel, so I really hope that you guys were able to at least take away something from this video, even though you might not directly be competing in these events. Hopefully you still learned a little bit about some things in Raid Shadow Legends. So with that being said, that's going to be it for the video today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed. Consider subscribing to the channel for more videos like this in the future. If you want to help out, tossing a quick like means a whole bunch as well, so thank you to all of you who do that. And more Raid Shadow Legends videos should be popping up on the screen right about now. Feel free to check them out. But if not, until next time, this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.